Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, welcome to Casual Friday. I am GM Jim. Over there is...
I'm Brad Wolf from Dire Den.
And we have a very special guest joining us today right down here.
Down here on Pittsburgh, Pat. Hey, it's great to see you guys. Thanks for inviting me onto the show.
Hey, Pat, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here?
Yeah, sure. So I guess you guys talk a little bit about this old game that people used to play called Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I experienced that in the 80s, and then when 5th edition came out, buddies of mine said, hey, let's get back into this. And now I have the distinct pleasure of teaching it after school to middle schoolers and grade schoolers, and also I'm a Adventure League DM, so I teach it to new players, adults as well. So that's where I come from. I have a YouTube channel. We just crossed 14,000 subs, so we're happy about that.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I did
Nacho?
Adventures League for a while prior to COVID, and then obviously the pandemic, I just stopped doing it and didn't go back, but I started a YouTube channel instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've also taught it to kids too. My wife owns a school, so I've done like after school clubs for kids there. So it's
So we got a lot to talk about then.
yeah, maybe we should like do a video together where we talk about running D&D for kids.
That's pretty much what I try to focus on my channel. I know everybody in the D&D community has a niche. I'm trying to find mine. I think mine is new players and how to teach kids how to play, because there are a lot of people my age who are like, hey man, this was a great game, and now my kids are watching Stranger Things and they want to play, and let's get back into this. I can do this. And then they pick up the player's handbook and they go, oh yeah, there's a lot of rules.
Yeah.
Indeed. Twin Steel says, hey, Pat. Unless you're in
Hey,
with Ryan,
Twin
you got a
Steel, I
huge
saw you
range
last
of
week.
vids. Twin Steel always shows up here for Casual Friday when he can. So we're going to get into the show now. Oh, first, I wanted to give a real quick update on the Faye Muncie, Indiana situation. Pat, I don't know if you saw the show last week, but I was cleaning out my storage unit, and I found there was a door in the back of the storage unit that had been blocked by some boxes. I went through it, and it took me to a Faye version of Muncie, Indiana. What I found was ruled by a coven of 3 hags, and I was working on rallying the people. Well, I went back, and like I said before, time works a little different there. I was in Muncie for maybe 6 months this time. And while I was there, I was working to like enlist soldiers against the hags, like trying to rally the townspeople. It went pretty good at first, but after a while, things started to get kind of weird. We realized that the hags had put spies into some of our underground resistance meetings. And instead of attacking, what the hags did is they went out and they bought a whole fleet of ice cream trucks. They started sending them out in town and be like, free ice cream from the hags. And they really did a lot of damage to our cause. They really won back a lot of hearts and minds.
They did the grassroots thing.
So,
my first question was, when you found the door in the back of the storage unit, did you check for traps?
I did. And my roll told me everything was fine. I rolled a 1, thought it was fine, went straight through. But
It's so funny because the first time you like throw a trap at a group, they never look at a door the same way again. They're like, you're like, and yeah, there's a door at the end of the corridor, and they're like, where's the road? Where's the road?
Yeah, Twin Steel, the hags are playing that diabetes slow game. It's their ultimate evil. But the ice cream was good. What can I say? I had one piece, just one.
That's one of my favorite things to do when my players roll low on a perception check or some other skill check, to say, it looks fine to you, or you think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, it's a door. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
Okay, so let's do a couple of news items. The first thing we discovered, Brad just told us recently that dungeon crawler is now part of the English dictionary, according to this EN World post. And what did it say about it? The term originated as a phrase referring to tabletop role-playing games, a video game where gameplay is primarily focused on defeating enemies while exploring a usually randomly generated labyrinthine or dungeon-like environment. And I don't know, yay nerds! We're pushing.
About time.
We're pushing our way ever closer to acceptable social modern culture.
I love that they made sure that they put the module Tomb of Annihilation in there because, you know, that's exactly where you want new people to jump on board. The most deadly dungeon you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and like just the idea that like Dungeons and Dragons tabletop role playing game culture is becoming mainstream enough that it's actually in the dictionary. This is cool. As someone who, you know, like you, Pat, grew up in the '80s playing this game, and I'm sure, you know, you have your satanic panic stories from back then, and that we were so outcasts at one point to now that, you know, terminology from our old pen and paper game has shaped the landscape of video games, and now it's even in the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
I had somebody yesterday who was concerned about the satanic panic and the fact that I was teaching Dungeons and Dragons, and I said, "Have you read the Arthurian legends?" I said, "That's what I do with the kids. You know, it's heroic quests. You know, it's like doing good deeds, working together, that sort of thing." Meanwhile, the kids are all like, "I want to be chaotic evil." You know, it's like, all right, down, boy. We'll get there.
Yeah, one of my favorite kids that I was playing with in an after school club, she played a ranger, and she was like, for the first like 4 weeks, she was the one that wanted to talk to every animal, negotiate with every monster. She was like becoming the face of the party, and the party rarely got into combat because she was always trying to talk her way through things. And then the following week, like after like 4 weeks of that, she shows up and she was just in a mood, and she's like, I'm like, she just, everything before anybody could talk, she's like, I shoot it. So she was just in a mood that day. She was just on attack mode.
Destroy.
So
Sometimes it is the only way to rid the stress.
Yep. I have one of my adult players who plays on my weekly game who he'll give me a heads up. He'll text me. He's like, "Bro, today I've got to fight something."
No, it's good knowing that going into the session. That way you can give them a tough enemy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a summer camp I taught at a local university, but it's for, you know, it's like I have a kids school there. So it's a Catholic university. So that's fine. But at the break, so like I had these kids and they were like, do we have to go do medieval stuff or can we do real life stuff? And I said, we can do real life stuff. What do you want to do? And one kid's like, well, I want to go to the get-go. And I'm like, okay. So we go to the gas station and I say, okay, there's a witch there with a book and you're not sure what's going on. And then somehow they convinced me that they were looking for a laser gun. And I'm like, yeah, you can have laser guns in D&D, no problem. We'll just do like Spelljammer kind of stuff. And then they end up knocking over the gas station. Meanwhile, these are like, you know, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. And they blow up the gas station. And so we're at the break, we're like at recess, and these two nuns come past and they're like, hey boys, you guys having fun? And the one kid says, we just knocked over a get-go. And I'm like, first day, I'm never gonna get invited back. They didn't even blink, they just walked past. Perfectly fine. So anybody out there for the satanic panic thing, tacitly blessed by two nuns, D&D is fine.
That's great. Yeah, the first time I ran for my two oldest children when they were younger, the adventure had a hag, and they finally defeated the hag, and it was very cathartic because I just started running 5th edition because it had just come out, and the battle was way harder than I meant for it to be. So when they defeated the hag, it was very cathartic because it was such a hard fought, adventure. And so my son just described his character stabbing the hag over and over and over again, as he was having this kind of catharsis moment, finally winning the adventure. And then the youngest of the kids told their grandmother about it. And so she told him the whole story. And then she's like, and at the end, we just kept stabbing the hag, stabbing her over and over and over again. And I was like, oops.
Yeah, grandma might not approve of that.
Yeah, it didn't go over too well.
Yeah, what are you going to do? The next item on our news agenda that we're going to talk about is the Critical Role animated show Vox Machina. Seasons 1 and 2 are now on YouTube for free. And the first, 3-4 episodes are out on Prime as of now?
Yeah, the first 3 are out on Prime, and I think it's going to follow 1 episode a week after the first 3, so...
I saw the first 2 seasons. I am going to wait until they're all out because I have to binge. I can't handle once a week. I know that blah, blah, blah. You retain more information. It's better socially because you have more time to talk about it. Screw that. I want to watch them all right now. I don't care.
Yeah, I watched the first 3 episodes because my Buccaneers lost last night and I wasn't going to go to bed on a down note, so I stayed up and watched all 3 episodes before going to bed last night.
I've seen the first couple episodes of the first season. The thing with binging is, like, if I own the channel, like if it's Prime, I got Prime. So, like, no problem, binge away. Or I'm sorry, the other way around. I'll watch each episode as it comes out. Like I just watched the last Rings of Power, because that came out yesterday. And I'm caught up with that. So, but like House of the Dragon, for instance, I can only have so many streaming services at once. I don't watch that much TV. So it's like, so I will eventually just say, okay, my wife will be like, I want to watch Harry Potter. I'll be like, great. All right, we'll cancel Paramount Plus and we'll get HBO Max. We'll do the shuffle and then We'll just do that for a while. And, so that's kind of the way it works. Binging works with that kind of rotation of the streaming services.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I just canceled HBO Max after finishing House of the Dragon like a month or so ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I love HBO Max. You got all you got, like I said, Harry Potter, you got Lord of the Rings, you got all the Matrix, I think, used to be on there. I don't know if that's still on there or not. But there's a lot of great stuff. But it's like, can I just sit there and I don't know, it's only $15, but why does that bother me so much,
Well, it's only $15, but if you have 7 different streaming services, that adds up.
Yeah.
Right.
Twin Steel has asked a very loaded powder keggy kind of question. Because I don't know, if you go ask people on the internet how they feel about Rings of Power, they all have very strong feelings. It almost rivals the feelings people have about Star Wars.
Well, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. You can see there's a lightsaber back. There's only one in camera right now, but there's probably like 10 in this room. But the negative press always gets the eyes, right? So that's one of the reasons my YouTube channel is as small as it is, because I love my Star Wars. I'm a geek. I can criticize it. Sure, I can poke holes in it. But I know what it is, it's a fantasy adventure, You put me in a darkened movie theater, you play John Williams and you throw lasers on the screen, I'm happy, I'm cool. I know there's plot holes, I know, but I'm cool with it. Now, the thing with Rings of Power, I won't put any spoilers out there. Is it worth watching? Do you like Tolkien? It's more Tolkien. I mean, yeah, it's somebody's interpretation of it, and perhaps contemporary plot writing has, accentuated heroines over heroes for the moment or whatever. I get that. I know there's going to be a big argument about that. But, I can forgive some of it. I'm just looking at the cool, set pieces. And I like stage fighting. So, I took a stage fighting class last year. We were doing quarterstaffs. So, when they get into, fighting with, props and, swords and shields, I'm watching that. You know what I mean? That's enough for me. So I guess I'm a forgiving viewer.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first season. I'm not like hypercritical, kind of like Pat. Like I don't take a lot of that stuff personally. I'm like this is your artist's vision of it. I'll watch it, and if I like it, I like it. If not, no big deal. I don't like go on crusades on the internet over stuff. But I mean, I'll go on crusades about D&D because that's special.
That's important.
To me. Yeah. But I think it's worth watching. I haven't seen the new season. I'm hoping there's a little more combat in the new season. The first season was a little bit of a slow burn. But yeah, I'm just excited that we have all this cool fantasy content to consume, right? Wizards and Warp Drives mentioned the animated Norse mythology series, which I can't think of the name of right now. But I started watching that one too.
Is that good?
I think it's gonna be good. I only watched like the first 2 episodes, I think. It's definitely not for kids. Like, it is very R-rated, even though it's animated. But yeah,
I enjoyed the first season of Rings of Power. I haven't seen the second season yet. I'm probably going to start watching it this weekend. I will say that the thing it most did for me was that every time I watched it, it made me want to play D&D.
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
You're like, oh, that's suggestion. Oh, he just cast suggestion. Yeah. In fact, that would be a fun video to make. Is like just to like watch an episode and just go like, wait, that's vicious mockery right there. Like roll 3 d8s or 3 d6s, I should say.
yeah. Well, even though it was like 12:30 at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, when I was watching the newest episodes of Vox Machina, I was still like pausing it and pulling out my phone, like D&D Beyond, like, can I build a character that does that? Right? Like it immediately gets those gears turning about how could I build that kind of character, or how could I use that as a DM? I just love the fact that we have so much more fantasy content to consume than we ever had before.
Well, back
Indeed.
to Fox Max and Max. So, like the artificer, right? Like the guy with the gunslinger, right? Percy. So, like, how do you guys handle that? Like, how do you handle firearms? Is it just like a reskinned short bow, or like how do you do that?
I've only had one player who really wanted to do that, and he used the artificer class because it was out. I've always kind of workshopped the idea like that, just reskin a crossbow, but I've not had a player that really wanted to lean into the gunslinger thing until the artificer came out.
Got it.
So
Yeah, that's how I've done it, is reskinning.
Yeah,
Maybe
flavor's
change
free,
the
right?
range
So
a
just
bit.
like, yeah.
yeah, I did have a player who played a sorcerer who flavored his like arcane focus as like what he called like a spell gun.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
so it was like this gun shaped arcane focus that he channeled his magic through, and he would he took all the roll to hit spells and would run around blasting stuff and twin casting it and having
So it's like a
fun.
wand.
Yeah, it was basically just a wand that looked like
Yeah.
a gun, but it seemed to scratch that gunslinger itch for him.
Nice.
All right, you guys want to talk about what we know about the new Dungeon Master's Guide?
Yeah.
So they Wizards of the Coast put out a couple of videos this week. It appears they're doing the same thing that they did in the lead up to the Player's Handbook, where they were pumping out all kinds of videos about the classes and crafting and all the other stuff and the new spells and stuff. And it looks like they're doing that for the Dungeon Master's Guide. I can't imagine that they're going to be able to reveal as much. They already revealed quite a bit about it in a video they put out. They did an overall video on the DMG, and then a video specific to Bastions. I'm glad they did that because Bastions is one of the things I'm the most interested in. I like what I saw so far in the UA for the most part. But who wants to go first talking about their thoughts about, did both of you guys see the video?
Yeah.
Yeah. My initial reaction is kind of like the same as it was with the Player's Handbook. If at least half of what they're saying is true, I think I'm gonna like it, because they're saying a lot of cool stuff. I just, you're always a little skeptical, like how much are they gonna deliver on this? But like I said, as long as they get halfway there, like they're saying a lot of cool stuff about this book, so I think it's gonna be good. That's my general overview. We can dive into specifics.
So there were two videos, right? So the first video was about DMG, and really what I got out of that was about 50% of that video was Chris, I guess, the shaved head dude. He was like, maps. There's lots of maps. And I was like, dude, I can go on GitHub and get random map generator. Like I can get really cool, you know what I mean? Like, you guys gonna give me maps? But that's my critique. Like that's my critical brain going like, am I gonna buy this thing, right? I mean, of course I'm gonna buy it. But am I, am I gonna be happy when I bought it? I have the DMG from 2014 up here, or 2015, and I never used it. It's got a great cover. I love the cover art on it, but I don't use it because for me, that's basically a list of magic artifacts, right? So that's cool. I always love new magic artifacts, but like I could buy Ryan's book, and like get tables and get, I could buy third party stuff that does that. So, what are you giving me? Like what's the draw here? So the Bastions thing is a totally different thing. Love it. Always love the idea of like, I grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons with the Hall of Justice, the Justice League, and like, yeah, let's build it, man. Let's like put our party, we can each have a wing, and like have like a complex, and what's up with the Rogue? I haven't heard anything up in his room for days. Oh, is he even in there? Meanwhile he's practicing stealth. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought it was interesting. There were a couple places in the video and also in other videos where they've been kind of apologetic about the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, where you've seen Chris Perkins get like awkward when he talks about it. He'll say, "We ran out of time. We didn't get to do everything we wanted to do." And he's saying, this time around that's not the case. We had all the time we wanted to put in the stuff we want. And I think it's important to remember from like a educational standpoint, this book is for the most part not for us. It should be for us, but it should more be for new dungeon masters. Like that's how I would rate the book as a success or failure, is like how useful is it to someone who new to the game, who doesn't know how to run a game, doesn't know how to run combat and that kind of stuff. And based on what they've said about this book, I have hope. I have a lot of hope about it. I have some thoughts. One thought is I love all the art except for Venger. I hate his doofy look.
His face isn't very accurate.
His face is
kind of
weird.
like the mouth is upside down almost. I remember Venger, he had the fangs, right? Like he was, and I don't see any fangs here. Maybe they're in there. They're just a little blurred. But yeah. I like that they brought Venger back, but I mean, you want to go Satanic Panic. Like this is this is what you're leading with, like.
Chris Perkins said something very interesting at one point in the video. He said, the multiverse is the default setting for D&D, which I thought was interesting. I mean, I believe it. It makes sense. That's what they've been going for the last couple of years with their Planescape and Spelljammer kind of stuff. But it's interesting that they actually said it.
Yeah, well, and I think that's their way. Like multiverse is a term people understand now. Like obviously, when we started playing D&D, there was like nobody knew what a multiverse was, but D&D's always had the planes of existence, right? So you've always had the inner planes and the outer planes. So you've had this kind of multiverse concept, even though it wasn't called that. So I think now that people know what the multiverse is from Marvel movies and so forth and so on. They're using that term, but I think what's useful about that, even though you could critique them for like using the multiverse buzzword because it's, the in thing right now. But what's useful about that is being able to say all of your worlds are connected. So your world that you homebrew at home can be connected to Greyhawk. It can be connected to the Forgotten Realms via all these, planes of existence. So when you sit down with a new group of friends who have their world, your homebrew world and their homebrew world could be, connected if you traverse one of the planes. So you could go through the Feywild from your world and into your friend's world, right? And I think that's what's useful about saying that the planescape is this kind of universal setting for everybody's world.
Unless it's Eberron.
Unless it's Eberron.
Or Ravenloft. So I don't know. There's a rule in Adventure League that those two particular you run those different modules, and for whatever reason your characters can't cross over. Because of, I think with Eberron it's because of the tattoos that give you magical powers, right?
The dragon marks.
Yeah, dragon marks. So I did play a little bit of Eberron until I found that out, and I'm like, wait, I got a dead end character here. I already had a dead end job. I don't want a dead end character, So like in real life. But that's just Adventure League. I mean, that's not obviously homebrew. You can do whatever you want. But I've been playing a lot of Spelljammer, so that's always great to hear. And we have had some crossover with Spelljammer. In fact, one of the DMs that I kind of consider a mentor in my local gaming store, Mike, he threw some Thri-kreen into a adventure when we were doing Storm King's Thunder, just as a, and it was awesome, and so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing with what was it? Horde of the was it Hot DQ? Horde of the
Dragon Queen.
Dragon Queen, yeah, I'm gonna throw some of them in there, and so you hear this clicking sound from the darkness, and suddenly the kobolds' bodies are no longer there, and people are like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So they're trying to investigate this town at night, and they're running between the different adventures, and then I have a sub-adventure going on there in case they pick up on it, which I guess I was too subtle. They didn't really get to that part, but you only have a couple hours with those one-shots. I guess I was going too deep. But yeah, I do like the idea that they're all connected. In fact, I have Planescape waiting for me at the local library for me to pick up, because I'm like, I wanted to pick up some more stuff. But yeah, I've gotten a lot of mileage out of Spelljammer. That's really fun stuff.
Yeah, it's a cool setting. I know some people were critical of the newest 5e version, that there wasn't enough Spelljammer in their Spelljammer books. But overall, the setting is, it's a refreshing change of pace if you're used to playing like gothic horror or survival horror or just typical dungeon crawling, right? To have that change of pace of
he said the thing.
And lasers.
You said dungeon crawling. You used it. You said it.
The word of the day. Oh!
Bling, bling, bling.
Oh. But yeah, Wizards of Warp Drive mentioned that the newest video we were just talking about the new Dungeon Master's Guide told us stuff we already knew. In fact, some of it I think was the same footage from the video they put out months ago. I think a lot of the Chris Perkins, Todd Kendrick content was, I think it was all the same interview. We just got more of it this time around. Because I remember them saying some of the same things already. So that's true. Wizards of Warp Drives points out that we already knew some of this stuff. In fact, I think a lot of this stuff, if you had watched videos way back when they were first talking about launch. But
Fred here says it's good that Adventure Creation will have sample sheets. Well, the new DMG comes with a ton of things for you to be able to download. It comes with a PC tracker, a campaign conflicts tracker, an NPC tracker, a town builder, a bastion tracker, magic items given tracker. I like that one. Major conflict tracker, which I guess is different than the campaign conflict tracker, and a session planner. And these are all things that didn't exist before that Wizards has created, that they're in the DMG, and you can also go download them. I don't know if you have to own the book to be able to download them. We'll find out when the book comes out. But I like this, more tools for people to be able to, because, you know, when you're a dungeon master, if you're writing in paper, you're going to be making a lot of notes, keeping track of a lot of things, and you have to invent your own system for it, or somebody else is going to teach you how to do it. Because the 2014 DMG did not teach you how to take notes in a session.
No. So I do think like you said, Chris Perkins did sound almost apologetic. You know, I think he probably took a little bit of the criticism personally. That was kind of my read. You know, people talking about how bad the 2014 was. And he kept saying that the 2014 had a lot of good stuff in there. We just didn't organize it well. Which is true to an extent. But you could tell that I think, like, personally, he's trying to make up for, the feeling that he didn't do a good enough job on the last one. That was kind of my read on everything.
I was interviewing a dude from Italy who writes modules and D&D content, and he throws it out there. And we were talking, he said this, so if I'm wrong about this, tell me. But he said in the Dungeon Master's Guide, it says, the Dungeon Master is a player at the table. And he loved that quote. And he used that as like a core thing, like an idea. Like, yes, you're the adjudicator of the rules, but you're also a player, right? So you're part of the adventure. So see, I come from a writing background. So for me, I tend to lean towards, well, I'm carrying the story. Like, I'm making a story, right? But there is another way to DM, and I'm starting to lean into this now where, if I'm doing like an adventure league, a one-shot, I've got 2 combats, possibly 3, maybe one they can easily talk themselves out of or sneak away from. I've got some exploration, because that seems to be the one that was left kind of dangling in the wind in 5e, right? Everybody's complaining about 5e is there's not enough exploration, right? It's not a dungeon crawler anymore. It's social and it's combat, right? So I try to have at least one of those. And now I'm starting to lean into puzzles. But puzzles are tough because you got to get them right. And if you don't, then it's just a laughable joke and it's fine. People get past it. But there's another way to do it, which is, I'm gonna have encounters, and then I'm gonna let the players get through the encounter. Here's an obstacle. I don't know how you're gonna get around it. You figure out how to get around it, right?
Right.
And that's a pretty cool way to play for the Dungeon Master too, because it takes a lot of the preparation pressure off.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part about trying to write a Dungeon Master's Guide, is there's multiple ways to approach this game as a Dungeon Master. You can approach it as the storyteller, where you've got this kind of three-act structure that you're trying to implement in order to have a fulfilling story, right? Or you can approach it as, I want to do cool stuff, right? And that's kind of your gonzo dungeon master, right? Who wants the crazy dungeon crawl that I don't know why it's there, but a wizard did it, right? But it's like fun and weird and, puzzly and, I don't know why these things are swinging from the ceiling, but if you use them to get across the chasm, you're not going to fall into the lava, whatever, right? And then you also have just different ways to prep, right? Like, some people approach the prep very thoroughly. They want balanced encounters, and they're, doing all the math. And there's other people who are like, I've got 5 bullet points, I think I'm good, right? And they improv a lot, right? So there's so many different ways to DM and approach this game. I think it's difficult to write one specific Dungeon Master's Guide.
And speaking of different ways to run the game, Natrier mentions the sample adventures. They said there are 5 short adventures. In the video, they said that there are 1/2 to 1 page each. So these are really more like encounters.
Yeah.
But what I liked is that it says that each one has advice on how to run it, which is that's what I want. Show me an encounter and then say, now here's how you do this. You
Right.
start out describing the town, then you describe, I don't know what it's going to say, but any advice on how to actually run an adventure that was nowhere in the 2014 DMG.
Right.
That's true.
And I think they took the feedback, the criticism that people gave over the 2014 one, and I think they totally approached this new book as we're writing this for brand new dungeon masters. I think it was clear that I don't think they thought 5th edition was going to be as huge as it was. So I think they were still mostly writing 5th edition for people like, Pat and I, who came back to D&D because 5th edition came out, right? Like
Right.
we grew up playing older versions, for whatever reason, moved on to other stuff, and then 5th edition came out and it's like, ooh, let's go back to D&D. Like, so we already knew how to DM, right? So, that, I think, like, that was their audience when they were writing the 2014 DMG. Now they understand their audience needs to be, how do I teach a new person how to do this? Right.
I had heard somewhere, I don't remember if I actually heard Chris Perkins or Jeremy Crawford say this, or if maybe I dreamt that, but I had heard that they had said that before they put out the 2014 DMG, that Wizards had done a survey of a bunch of dungeon masters and found out that 50% of them were running D&D in homebrew campaigns, and that was surprising to them, and that influenced how they did the DMG. It's got this big section on like creating a pantheon, which isn't all that useful, and it had a lot of other stuff because they were like, oh gosh, we need to cater to these people who want to build their own stuff, and
Right.
so that's why it became such a big part of it. I don't know if that's true.
Well,
that makes sense based on what what's in the book. Go ahead, Pat.
I had a French teacher who said that once you start dreaming in French, then you'll know you're fluent. So, Jim, you're fluent in D&D, I guess, if you're dreaming about Chris Perkins. Yeah. No, it's, there's a couple things there. So the deity thing is funny because I have, like, the AD&D book, Deities and Demigods, like the original I caught, luckily, and, never look at it. When I make a character, almost never consider deities. But I don't play clerics a lot. I don't play warlocks that have patrons. But I know some people get into that sort of stuff. But creating a pantheon would be a blast. When they adapted the Greek mythology into a book, right? What was that one? I forget what that one was called.
The Mythic Odyssey of Theros.
There you go. Got it out of the library and never used it. I thought this is going to be too tough. If people were well versed in Greek mythology, it would be awesome for them. But they're probably Strixhaven would probably work better because most people know more people know Harry Potter than know Greek mythology, in my experience, right? So riffing on that is cool if you know what the original source material is, right? Mm-hmm. But that was a stretch. But as far as like structuring an adventure, I think that would be useful. I think teaching kids teaching kids how to read stat blocks, that's like useful, but it depends on how old the kids are. There's math, right? And so like, it's like, well, how do you create a situation where you're not killing your player characters? How do you balance that? The challenge rating thing, like, I know adult DMs that still have trouble with the challenge rating formula, and I personally just, that's why I roll behind a screen, because I don't want to kill everybody on their first time out. If I'm playing with experienced players, sure, I'll totally run a deadly dungeon if everybody's aware that that's possibly going to happen. But for the beginners, I'm probably not going to kill your character.
Right. Yeah. You got to know your audience, right? And that's like you said, that's true with experienced players, new players. Because even with experienced players, you have some that want the big heroic fantasy. They You got others that want like the deep story and the narrative and like your relationships and all that sort of stuff. Then you got the beer and pretzel crowd that just want to fight monsters. So whenever you're DMing, that's an aspect of it too, right? Knowing your audience, for sure. Mm-hmm. And Wizards and Warp Drives pointed something out about how if you have D&D Beyond and access to the new Maps app, right? That's kind of like almost getting the starter box where you have everything you need to start playing.
Cool.
Right? If you think of it that way, it's like the digital version of a starter box. If you get the 3 core books, the Dungeon Master Guide does an effective job of teaching you how to play, and then you have maps on D&D Beyond, you pretty much have everything you need to play online. Mm-hmm. Which is not like us.
Yeah.
Maybe, right?
I play in person, so it's I'd be up for learning that, how to play online and playing online more, but I don't know. For me it's the social aspect of it, the in-person social aspect of the game is a really big part of that for me. Not that you can't do it like this. I mean, we're having fun, we're laughing too, so that's awesome. But there is a lot of, I get envious of dungeon masters that have access to those tools and project them from their laptop onto the big screen TV inside of the game shop. And I'm like, whoa, where'd you get that? And they're like, Roll20, D&D Beyond. Wait, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm totally analog here. I guess I'm in the Stone Age or something. I don't know.
You got a vinyl mat and a dry erase marker, right?
Exactly. And figurines.
But I mean, to market this to the new generation, I think that's a really good point that Wizards and Warp Drives makes, is that it's like having all these tools out of the box, like actual, if you're the generation that does everything online, right, you have everything you need to play D&D.
I want to point out 2 different things that our friend Fred has said here. Fred says that the sample adventures in the DMG are not encounters. It's Chris Perkins' note style. Goal, session recap, NPC list, locations, and list of encounters on one page from an old article, which is interesting. And then Fred also says, I hope the DMG ditches the challenge rating system. Unfortunately, Fred, they are not. We have confirmation that new stat blocks have challenge rating. And they have promised us a better way to calculate it. They didn't say that occurs in the DMG. I think that'll probably be the new monster manual when D&D 2025 is upon us.
Oh, and somebody in the chat, since we're talking about, you just mentioned the monster manual and challenge rating and all that. Somebody in the chat mentioned that in the Dungeon Master's Guide video, they didn't mention making monsters.
Right.
So I'm wondering if maybe that's going to be in the monster manual. Having guidance on how to build your own monsters.
Yeah, could be. Do you guys want to shift gears and talk about bastions?
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea.
Bastions. Yep.
So if you don't know, if you've been under a rock, bastions are like a version of strongholds that they used to have in old versions of D&D. These are an optional feature, and players can get them, or PCs can get them at level 5. They said in the video they thought strongholds were too high level before. But basically that's what a bastion is. It is a dwelling. One thing that's in the video was, there's a quote, players say, I'm not sure what my characters are supposed to do with their money. I have certainly said that in a D&D game before. I've had that said at me by players in a D&D game before. So bastions go wild. They can go super bougie and blow all their money. The party can share one, or each person and each PC can have their own. Bastion, what happens at a bastion has a turn, and it happens every 7 game days. You have facilities in your bastion, which some facilities are cosmetic, like bedrooms, and some are functional, like an alchemy lab or a guild hall. You could host a guild hall for your class. And then on your turn, you direct facilities in that bastion to do different things, which resolves into different things. Like some are like your alchemy lab, you can have them making potions for you. Your guild hall, they can be discussing your future plans. So, and one thing that they stressed a lot in the Bastion video was that it can run essentially without a dungeon master. That once the Bastion is established and everybody knows the rules, and assuming nobody cheats, the players could all take their Bastion turns with, over Discord or over text message with each other. I'm surprised they didn't announce a Bastion app that links to players' character sheets.
Ooh, maybe there'll be a mini game app somewhere, like a builder app. Yeah, I thought of like Fallout 4 and like building your like settlements and that kind of thing, and I was like, because I never did that. I was all like, I'm just doing the missions. I don't care about the settlements. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, this is cool. This reminded me. The first thing I thought of was like Wayne Manor. Got your bat cave, got your facade in the front, you got your secret hideout, you got your lair, and then there's the opportunity to do things like, I think it was Tomb Raider 2, one of the Tomb Raider sequel games where the game starts inside the Croft mansion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like you could actually have somebody infiltrate your bastion, and now you got to find them. They come in, it's a heist. They're trying to steal something from you, and you're trying to protect something. You could have that. So instead of like, you all start, like you all start. You're in a tavern. Instead of that, now it's like you're in your hideout. You're having dinner at your dining room table. Alfred is serving you, lobster, and meanwhile you hear a noise upstairs, and now it's a new starting point maybe. That's what I was thinking. But when you were talking about the different factory kind of options, right, where things are happening in the background, they limit you to like 6 of them, I think, right? You get to level 17, you can have 6 things like operating, like a thieves guild here and a potion factory over here, and there's I forget what the other ones they mentioned were, but I like the idea. I mean, I remember being in a campaign where we set up a business and it would generate gold every so often, and then we would like dish it out to the community or, try to keep our reputations high or something like that. But now you could have like, you have a thieves guild, there's a thieves guild in the city, and now you got like a Don Corleone kind of thing going on there, right?
Right.
There's a lot of adventure that could happen here.
I think there's a lot of opportunities that can come with it, and there's a lot of different ways to use it. I'm interested because Fred in the chat said that he's been using it, and there is a learning curve for players because there's like they have to do their own calculations and all that sort of stuff. So I'm curious, Fred, if you found it worth it. Like, are your players willing to do the work? Or do you have a few of them who are and a few of them who aren't? So that would be my question in response to that. But yeah, I like the idea overall.
I don't think we do know. I don't know if they said exactly how many pages the DMG. They did say it was bigger.
Yeah.
AC Inc. Incorporated. I really hope that for Bastions, they will start to incorporate them into future published adventures. And I would like to see them incorporated in previous published adventures, like as a like DM's Guild product. Like in Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the 1 to 5 level one. There's essentially a Bastion in that game. There's
that one?
Spoiler, sorry, but there's a whole chapter in the game where you and your party like run an inn.
Yeah.
And
that's
a whole chapter of the game, and you could easily turn that into a Bastion, and you could easily expand Waterdeep Dragon Heist to like level 8 or 9, because if you're running your Bastion in the city, more things are happening. You're gonna have rivals in the city. They could very easily do this, come out with a book of bastions, and it's like, here are good bastions that could be in Icewind Dale, or in Thay, or in Kryn, like just a book of
Or just
good
Candlekeep. Here's Candlekeep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's the layout, right?
Yeah, they could very easily come up with a series of suggested bastion locations and how picking certain locations lead into certain plot hooks. Like ways that if your players have this bastion here, here's how you can adapt these plot hooks to then include that as part of the ongoing narrative.
Yeah, and that would be a way to revive old products. Like, that'd be a good business model too, right? Because then you're reselling the old stuff that is in your back catalog. But like Dragon Heist seems ripe for that, because you have the 4 factions, and if you run it as written, the DM picks one of those factions, which leaves you 3 more, right? And so you could easily take whichever 3 you didn't use and build a campaign around your bastion and those other 3 factions, and Jem, like you're saying, go up to like level 9 or 10.
Well, I was going to say this before about Dragon Heist, is that before we were talking about bastions, is that we were talking about story structure, but this kind of like goes into this. It's like, you were talking about the DM that wants to like have the most epic adventure, right? Just throw a bunch of stuff in there. So when I read the first chapter of Dragon Heist, it's like, okay, there's Volo. Well, Volo's lost his friend, and then you have to go find Volo's friend. Meanwhile, I'm like, wait, we're in the yawning portal. We have like one of the most epic bartenders in all, except for like Large Luigi from like, the Rock of Brawl. He's like the second like best bartender like character, and I was a bartender, so like I'm like, okay, so we're gonna have Durnan here. I'm like, okay, you guys gonna meet Durnan, you're gonna meet Volo, and then Xanathar's clan is mentioned, but no, you know what? No, Xanathar is going to come out of the yawning portal and kidnap Volo and go down the portal with him. And you're going to have 3 classic characters in one scenario, because this might be the only time anybody ever plays D&D at this table. And like, I want to get them hooked. Like, I want to hook them. Like, here's some crazy characters, very distinctive. And then I did them in all different voices too. So Xanathar had like this high-pitched German accent, like, Durnan, the last time I schnitzel in your, in your place, it was terrible. And then Durnan's French, so he's like, oh, Xanathar, it was not even, schnitzel, it was beef bourguignon, you idiot, and they have this rivalry. So, like, I don't know, like, to me, the adventures as written are suggestions, right?
Right.
And then, like, run with it. So if you want to throw a bastion in here, absolutely, like, do it. That's just going to add more excitement. Throw it all in the mix. But like, also simplify it too. Like, don't have too many NPCs, or you're going to confuse. Like, have distinctive NPCs, but don't have too many of them, or they're going to go nuts. They're like, is that the guy that sells the wands, or is that the guy that sells the rings?
Yeah. When I ran Dragon Heist, I used all 4 of the factions. They ended up kind of choosing one that they thought was the main bad guy, and they focused on them. It was the noble couple, Castellanters, I think they were called. But then once they got the treasure, they had to fight their way back out of the dungeon because the other 3 factions kept showing up.
I just wanted to answer this real quick. It was already answered in chat, but yeah, they're updating Keep on the Borderlands for 5e. That is what they're doing there. I was just thinking about integrating bastions into new books, and I have a theory. Here's my theory, is that 2026 we will see a 10th anniversary Curse of Strahd edition with updated stat blocks and maybe stuff like bastions in Ravenloft. And maybe we'll see a 10th anniversary Tomb of Annihilation, where here's how you can build your bastion and port whatever in
Nyan Zaru or
Nyan Zaru.
Nyan Zaru. Yep.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I
I
think
love
that's-
Cholt though. Cholt's so different from the Sword Coast that I love Cholt. It's just, that was another one that we had. There was a thing. I'm like, we're in Cholt, and these guys are gonna like do there's a red dragon and there's a devil that's coming out of the abyss in the middle of the forest. But we're in Cholt. What's Cholt known for? dinosaurs. So we got to throw some dinosaurs. So we had D&D and D&D. We had like we had Dungeons, Dragons, Devils, and dinosaurs. You know?
There you go.
Yeah, just throw it all at them.
Yeah, I love Port Nyanzaru. Just a totally different flavor of city with like dinosaur riding and it has a completely different feel than like Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter, right? I really enjoyed running the first part of that adventure.
And the descriptions of the marketplace, a lot of the descriptions, whoever wrote that incorporated smells. The smells of the spices, the smells of the animals, the smells of the humanity, the smell of the ocean. It's very humid. Like, it really gave you a feel, right? Like all 5 senses. Like, you could taste the salt air, you know, like there was, it really made you, if you're a dungeon master and you're describing a scene to your players, you know, don't forget smells and tastes, you know, like sit them down when the quest giver is giving them their quest. Maybe they're eating, you know, seafood chowder. Maybe they're eating, you know what I mean? Give them something distinctive. It's amazing how those little hooks will draw them in, and later they'll come back to you and be like, hey, remember that time we were eating that seafood chowder? It's like, yeah, you don't remember the red dragon? No, the chowder was really good.
Yeah. I think that's one thing you can do. Might be like a worthwhile discussion for us to have is kind of like, what are the highlights of the different adventures, right? Because, you know, I think the internet's done a pretty good job of telling us what's wrong with all the published adventures. But it might be nice to like have a conversation of what are the highlights? What can we learn that's good from each of these published adventures? That might be a cool discussion for a Casual Friday.
I like it.
Any more thoughts on Bastions, guys? We ready to move on to our final main topic?
There's one thing I was wondering about the Bastions is like I wonder if they're going to get into any kind of architectural styles. Because like, I know like, I'm just imagining like the outside of like a rogues as opposed to the outside of the clerics. You know, like you could imagine like the clerics might be like, you know, more like a church or something like that, and you know, a temple or something like that. And you know, the rogues would be like, you know, you have to go down. It's subterranean. You have to go downstairs. Yeah. It's like that basement bar and, you know, side street in New York City that only the locals know about. You know, that kind of thing.
Well, I think they do have different titles of the Bastions. Like, I think there is a temple and a tower and something else. I think there's a few different names they give you. So, and they said they had artwork. So I'm curious if they give us artwork for each of those different named Bastions. That might kind of capture that flavor you're talking about of like how each character can say, oh yeah, mine's more like a tower, mine's more like a temple, and you know, and if they're like my players, they're gonna want to connect all their Bastions together and, you know, make a big fortress or their own city or something. My players are always like, you know, trying to angle the business aspect. I don't know. I think my players all want to run their own business in real life.
I think the other thing is this will be great for Adventure League too, because there's downtime in Adventure League. You have 10 days of downtime, right? What do you do with that? If you're not a wizard, you're not attuning to a magical object, or you're not, you know, doing, you know, you just take another level. But now you have 10 hours or 10 days of downtime. The Bastion thing will work into that really well, I think.
Yeah. Well, one last thing, Fred mentions that it might be a bit complex for the general community. I hope they toned it down, because I know that was one of the things, I think somewhere, I don't know if it was on one of these shows, we talked about the Bastion idea, and that I thought it was a little overly complex in the Unearthed Arcana playtest, and that I thought they should streamline it a bit, because you had like level requirements and gold requirements, and then like these Bastion points. And my feedback to that, you know, UA was that like they needed to streamline that to make it more simplified.
Yeah. Mike, it is like Strongholds and Followers of MCDM. I only glanced at that book. I didn't read it all the way through, but from what I understand, it is going to be like strongholds and followers. Well, let's talk about the wizard.
Yeah.
Oh
Dun,
yeah,
dun, dun.
totally forgot about the wizard.
The book's flying all around. Brad, do you want to take us through the wizard?
Yeah, let me pull up my notes here. So, basically, it looks like there's 2 new features to the class itself. You have the scholar ability at level 2, which does away with the where you can copy spells into your spell book and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I think that's mentioned in the the magic section of the wizard, but you actually get the expertise in an intelligence skill at level 2 to replace what was kind of a ribbon ability before, with like how you copy your spells into your spell book. And then at level 5 you get the memorize spell ability, which I think that replaces. I made all these notes last week, so at level 5 that replaces. What was it in the old one? I forget what it replaces, but it now the memorize spell whenever you finish a short rest, you can study your spell book and replace one level 1 wizard spell that you have prepared. So it lets we see this with all the other classes where you get an ability to get some spells back on a short rest. I think all the spellcasting classes have a version of that now, so the wizard gets that as well. But overall, there's not big changes to the wizard, because I think the wizard was already one of the best classes in the 2014 version anyway. So my kind of high-level view of the new wizard is that they kind of used wizard as the benchmark. Like, this is how powerful the wizard is. Let's tone the paladin down a little bit, and let's bring everybody else up a little bit, and try to get all the classes right around the sweet spot that the wizard was at. That's kind of my impression after we've gone through all these classes of kind of how they approach this design.
Yeah, the wizard didn't need a lot of tune-ups. Like all the other classes, it gets a few. It's a little bit more wizardy. Like they get an extra spell at level 1. They get more spells overall. I think that this memorize spell, when I first saw that word, I recalled in the UA they had this very convoluted, like multi-step process for wizards where to create, like to make their own spell, and it was like there was like a 3rd level spell, then a 5th level spell, and a 7th level spell, and you had to cast all 3 of them to make your own spell. And I was like, nobody's going to use this. This doesn't make any sense at all. I'm very glad they dropped that. As far as I know, I can't tell, maybe it's in a subclass somewhere, but that like invent your own spell thing that was like a multi-step process in the UA was completely stripped out. I'm very glad about that. But as I was reading through this, I have a question. I have a discussion question for the two of you, Brad and Pat. With the cleric, they smushed a lot of the domains together so that everybody gets 4 subclasses, right? So there are fewer cleric domains to choose from. With the cleric, I noticed that they took a lot of those features that were in the deprecated domains and just dropped them into like the base class, or dropped them into other subclasses. And I don't really see that here with wizard. So my question is, the discussion question for today, gentlemen, is, do you think limiting the subclasses to 4 takes away too many options for the wizard?
I think that wizards are defined by their spells, right? I mean, that's the defining thing. And so I think that what I like about, if I'm reading this right, because I don't play wizards very much because they can be confusing to me. There's so many options, when you take, so you can, your spell list defines you. So I don't think you're limited by being an abjurer or an illusionist. The one thing I do like, I really like the evoker's shape spells. That's like, who doesn't want to be able to throw a fireball in a cave and not hit your own guys. You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. But that's what but the, I feel almost like, maybe because it's my lack of familiarity, but I feel like I would be comfortable playing any one of these subclasses. And I don't think it would limit it doesn't seem like it would limit a lot of options to me. Maybe I'm not reading it right.
No, I think I agree, especially now that there are so many like summoning spells, because they imported all the summoning spells from Tasha's, right? So I think with that you can play a necromancer type character or a conjurer type character by kind of picking your spells, like Pat's saying. I'm trying to think of, so beyond those two, what are the other two that are left that are not here? Because we've got Abjurer, Illusionist, and Evoker, and Diviner are all here in the new book. And
Transmutation.
Transmutation. Does anybody really like that big on transmute? I did play a transmuter, but it was only because I wasn't sure what wizard school to pick for the theme of my character.
It's a big level 1 decision. Here's 10 things, pick one.
Right.
It determines the rest of your career. Choose wisely.
Well, that's also the thing they're doing with that short rest that you mentioned. Like, you can, like, I think what there's a couple things going on. I think they're trying to make short rests more relevant in this book. I think that's a pretty popular idea, and I think that's true. And I think that they're allowing spellcasters to have a way of saying, oh man, I picked the wrong spells again. I was all set up for social encounters and now we're in a dungeon. And now it's like, don't worry about it, man. Just meditate for an hour, you're fine. Then you can pick your weaponized spells and we're going to be okay. We're going to keep going. Because, back in the day when you used to go dungeoneering, you were expected to leave the dungeon maybe a couple times and then go back in the longer dungeons, right? Now nobody has time for that business. So, we gotta get this dungeon done, right? So, so the short rests are more powerful. I don't want to say that has anything to do with Baldur's Gate 3 because the timings doesn't seem to be right, but you wouldn't be able to argue against it if that were the case because that's taking rests, and Baldur's Gate 3 gave you like more quest opportunities, side quests and things like that. So maybe it also allows for that kind of thing too, where you take a short rest and you discuss strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are we gonna do here, guys?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that like the timeline doesn't quite add up for them to say that they stole this from Baldur's Gate. But I think it's logical if you're looking at the game and thinking, how do I make this better? Whether Wizards of the Coast is looking at it to say, how do I make this better for table play? And Larian's looking at it, how do I make this better for, a video game play? Like, they can come up with the same solution. Like, short rests need to be more powerful so you don't have to take as many long rests because the long rest kind of stalls the momentum, right? So I think they may have just arrived at the same solution because the difference in short rests was kind of a problem. Because I've definitely,
if you're a sorcerer, you're like, I need a short rest, and the rest of the party's like, what? Come on, let's go. And they're like, no. If I get a short rest, I am like back to like almost full, and everybody else is like, that does nothing for me.
Yeah,
I get to roll a hit die, but I don't have any damage. So like, what? The fighter doesn't care about that, right?
Right. Yeah, and the warlock obviously is very dependent on short rests.
Or the warlock, I meant. I said sorcerer, I meant warlock. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, some classes definitely benefited more from the short rest than others. So there was always a little bit of tension in the party of like, do we really need to take another short rest? And the warlock and the monk were like, yes, we do.
Fred makes an interesting point here. Limiting the wizard to 4 subclasses is fairer for the other classes.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the main reason they did it, right? Because in the old book, the cleric and the wizard had they each had 8, right? And everybody else, like some of them only had 2. Like the druid and the monk, was it druid and monk only had 2? So, you know, it
Well,
was
Rogue had 3, right? It was
Yeah,
Arcane Trickster.
I think the fighter only had 2 in the PHB. It was just Champion and Battlemaster.
no,
Yeah.
the had Eldritch Knight too. So
Oh, did
yeah,
it?
yeah. So fighter had 3. Rogue, I'm pretty sure had 3. I think Paladin had 3. But I'm pretty sure like the didn't the Ranger only have 2 and the Monk only have 2?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. In a way, the nice thing about that is that if you're a new player, you look at a fighter and there's 3 subclasses. You look at a wizard and there's 8 subclasses. You go, I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm going to pick the fighter. It's
Unless
sort of
you're an
that high
8-year-old
bar of
kid.
entry, scaring off people who won't be able to handle it.
Yeah.
So the druid should have like 12 subclasses then.
to warn
To
you
ward
away.
off, to scare away people who can't
Well,
handle it.
Actually, I mean, it looks like 4 is a good is a magic number here that these guys are doing with a lot of different stuff. Definitely with the subclasses, but like even with like when they give examples of like I think it was Druid, when they give examples of what you can turn into, right? I think it's like 4, and it's like they maybe somewhere stylistically they were looking at this and they were saying, okay, here's our outline. We're going to pick, we're going to have 10 classes. And or is it 10? Yeah, 10 classes. We're going to have 12 races. We're going to have 4 subclasses for each, and then they're like, okay, we just got to fill these in. And then they look at Wizard and they go, who can we lose? Right. We got to lose 2 of these. Got to go.
Yeah.
And they can always reintroduce them in a new Tasha's or a new Xanathars, right? They can always, that's their opportunity to write another book because now they can do the addendums, they can sell the DLC, right? They can do the thing that every business does, which is, you get the core book, but wait, there's more.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and also, like, they seem to pick thematically, right? We've talked about this before, kind of the 4 classes they do pick, in most cases, tend to represent that class in kind of 4 quadrants of, like, here's your magic-y version of the fighter, and here's your psychic version of the fighter, and here's just your straightforward fighter, and here's your, fighter with more options, right? So, like, they seem to, both game mechanic-wise and flavor-wise, do a pretty good job with the 4 subclasses, I think, in most cases, to represent that class fairly well.
Fred thinks too many things recharged on a short rest in 2014. I think they're one of the reasons that they've buffed short rests, or given, not buffed them, but given more classes useful things from short rest, is because there is no standardized number of combat encounters that you're supposed to have every day. I know what it says. I know what it says in the book. It says 6 to 8, but who does that? There's anywhere from 1 to 15 encounters in a day, and that's how it always was and is always going to be. You never really know. You might plan for 2 encounters in a day, and then the party punches the bartender in the face, and now they're in a 3rd encounter. You never know. So I think making short rests more powerful makes however many encounters you want to run per day more scalable. If you want to have 4, they're going to short rest in between number 2 and number 3. If you want to have 8, they're going to take 3 short rests.
Mm-hmm.
If you only have 1 big encounter, they're not going to need to short rest at all. That's my theory that I came up with about 45 seconds ago while you guys were talking. So.
Well, that's the great thing about these kinds of like roundtables is that like I just 10 seconds ago, I just had an idea I was thinking about, like when you organize an adventure, and even in video game design, they talk about like before you get to the final boss battle, all the boss battles before that are designed to take away some of your resources, a certain specific percentage of your resources, right? So you're supposed to be at like half resources when you meet the boss. If you get to like have a short rest in an ante room before you open that Tomb of the Mummy door, and you know what I mean, like then now everybody's at full strength and they're going to be able to beat the boss easily, right? So now the DM has to be on the fly going, oh, now he's got henchmen. Now there's 2 bad bosses. Now there's a boss behind the boss. So it's in flux. So this could make more chaos for the dungeon master, actually.
Right, yeah. Like Fred says, that the players determine how many encounters you have in Adventuring Day. And I did a video on the Adventuring Day a while back, and one of my points in that video was if you're using waves of monsters, right? And if you look at the encounter builder design in the DMG, right, that they consider each wave an encounter. So if you're doing waves of monsters, what you might think of as an encounter with 3 waves is technically, by the CR calculator design system, that's technically 3 encounters. So if you're doing waves of monsters, you can get pretty close to that, 8 encounter a day, by using those waves, right? But that's not really explained anywhere. It's just something that you kind of have to read between the lines in the encounter builder section.
Like passive perception in the first player's handbook. Was it on page like 212 or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a hard out here in a few minutes, so let's finish talking about what we came here to talk about. You guys have any final thoughts on the wizard? This is probably the one we had the least to say about because it's really the least tuned up class, but
yeah, like I said, it's the class that has the fewest changes, but it still remains, I think, one of the more powerful classes. And the other thing that I would just point out, as far as I think that's important for the new design, is there's the new Savant ability that all the subclasses have, which just gives you more spells of your chosen type. So if you're an abjurer, you get more abjuration spells. If you're an illusionist, you get more illusion spells. Instead of that bit where it used to be, it's cheaper for you to copy these spells into your spell book. They did away with all that and they just give you more spells. That's a much easier way to do it, and takes away the kind of accounting type aspect of that ability, which I think is just better, more streamlined design.
Yeah, but I think there's an optimal build then. If you're looking at that, at least the one class rating video I watched, I forget if it was Dungeon Dudes or who it was, but they did a really good job of trying to explain that. And they were saying that the certain subclasses have more options that you're going to want in their category, right? So I haven't looked at it that closely. I just remember kind of, like Jim said, falling asleep to it one night. And, and I'm like, oh, wait, did he say that? And so I'm going to build a wizard because I may build one of each subclass to investigate this because the wizard does so much, right? You can be a damage dealer. You can be a battlefield controller. You can be the bard. You can buff all your buff the paladin.
Right.
Buff the fighter. Just make him a tank. It's I don't know. There's a lot of really great options, and who doesn't want to use magic? It's Dungeons and Dragons for crying out loud.
Yep.
indeed.
Well, and the talking about the kind of min-max or optimizer kind of approach, the old Savant ability actually, the smart thing to do was to not lean into your school of magic, right? Because at lower levels, take all the spells you can that aren't in your school of magic, and then throughout the course of the game, because it's cheaper to copy those spells into your spell book, get your school spells in game, right? So the optimizer approach was the exact opposite of what the ability was trying to represent.
Right.
So, but yeah, overall, just I guess to sum up the last 3 weeks of these Casual Fridays where we've been talking about all these classes, I think overall the class design is better, and I think the disparity between classes is smaller, and I think that's good overall for the design of this particular game.
Indeed. So we're going to get out of here. Thank you for watching. Pittsburgh Pat, tell the people where they can find you on the internets. Go plug yourself a little.
Sure, youtube.com/@PittsburghPat. That's me. And yeah, love to have you over there. You want to talk about D&D? There's some Star Wars stuff on there too. We talk about all kinds of role-playing stuff, so, and just general games in general. But that's where I am.
Cool. So this guy over here is...
I'm Brad Wolf from Dire Den.
I'm GM Jim, and thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.